Now we wait.
Here we are. Hi, everybody. Welcome to today's live stream from Affectiva. I'm Graham Page. I lead the media analytics division at Affectiva. And today we're going to be talking about a project that we participated in with our partners at Unruly Media, all about the Pecan Rule and its application to advertising and how best to make a more effective advertising campaign. So I'm joined today by Alex Maguire from Unruly Media. Alex, do you want to introduce yourself, say a few words about who you are, what you do?
Yeah, sure thing. My name is Alex Maguire. I work in the insight team at Unruly. And I guess an introduction to Unruly is probably a good thing to do as well. So Unruly are an online video marketplace where we place client videos across all screens in a digital environment. And in the insight team, our job is all about helping clients to understand how to make their videos more effective for those environments.
Great, thank you. So the project that we worked on together, and you and I have talked about this at some length, so this should feel very natural. The project that we worked on is all about the Pecan Rule. Why don't you let us know a little bit about what the Pecan Rule is, the background to the project, and what we did?
Yeah, so the Pecan Rule is essentially a psychological heuristic. It's like a mental shortcut, which is based on a experiment conducted by Daniel Kahneman in the 1900s, which sounds like a long time ago. It was actually only last century. And the original experiment was all about receptivity to pain in relation to colonoscopies. And in that original experiment, Daniel Kahneman found that people were more willing to rate a medical procedure in a favorable way if the ending of that medical procedure was less painful, basically, regardless of the length of said procedure. So that's something that gave birth to this idea of the Pecan Rule, which is what Kahneman theorized is people rate experiences based on how they feel at an emotional peak and at the end of that experience, and not based on the experience as a whole. We use those two separate moments, the peak and the end, as proxies for the entire experience.
Right. So it's interesting to draw analogies between colonoscopies and advertising. So how do we get from there to kind of what we wanted to look at with this project?
Yeah, it's always the fun thing. The fun part of talking about this research is to mention the word colonoscopy. So the great thing about behavioral science and behavioral economics is that it's all based on the shared human understandings, these shared human behaviors, and that's essentially what the Pecan Rule, the theory of the Pecan Rule, is. It's identifying a almost innate human behavior which is applicable to everyone, and obviously marketing and advertising to be successful should be also applicable to everyone. So any way in which anything that advertisers can do to maybe take advantage of those existing memory biases that humans have is something that they should be considering. So we worked with Richard Shotton, author of The Choice Factory, as well, to kind of conceptualize a study in order to take advantage of the Pecan Rule and see whether or not that same idea is applicable for video advertising as well.
Right. Okay. So how do we do that? I mean, I think obviously I understand the study. It'd be good to kind of share that with people listening in. So how do we go about that? And obviously I can talk a little bit about our involvement as we go through.
Yeah, so at Unruly, in the Insight and the EQ team, we're constantly running content tests for our clients. So that involves taking a client's video asset, running it through our EQ content testing methodology, and then reporting back to clients to tell them, how emotionally engaging their video is, and using facial coding technology, Affectiva's facial coding technology, to identify where those emotional moments are occurring in the video using the facial coding trace, of course. So for this experiment, what we, in order to see whether or not the Pecan Rule was something that could be identified and acted on, we we identified videos using the facial coding tech where we could see that there were peaks in the emotional response. So that means that whether or not people, as they were watching the video, there was a increase in people smiling, for instance, at a certain point. And we used that methodology to identify 3 different categories of videos: a control group where there was a low emotional score, a multiple peaks group where there were more than one peaks and dips as viewers were watching the videos, and then a peak end category as well, where there was only one increase in expressiveness, but that peak came right at the very end of the video. So we used that categorization system to split up the videos, created 3 different cells, and we showed each of the videos to a different sample group. So cell 1 would have seen the control group, the control category, the multiple peak category videos, and the end peak category video. And then after exposing them to the videos, we recontacted them a week later with a recognition and recall survey to see what part of the videos they could recall, whether or not they could recall specific brands that they were exposed to, and whether or not they could recall specific creative elements as well. And the reason we split it up into 3 different cells is so that we could just really diversify the amount of the type of videos that we were showing to the respondents, and to make sure that we could average out any creative or brand or even vertical effects as well.
Great. And I think what I love about this study is it is a really direct test of the theory, right? It's not just saying, okay, do people think that they'll remember an ad that is, has a particular emotional profile? You went out and showed the ads to people, and then literally tested their actual memory for them a week later, which is surprisingly not done as often as you might think anymore. So yeah, that's what I loved about the study in many ways. Again, just to clarify kind of Affectiva's role in the study, as you say, and I would hope many people listening to this, because we're on the Affectiva social pages, know a little about Affectiva, but obviously our tech layer is an emotion AI layer that allows us to take facial video and codify the expressions that people have on their faces, with their permission, of course, so that we can then understand more about the emotional state people are in as they, in this case, respond to video. So yeah, our metrics in this case were used, as Alex has said, to classify ads into whether they were kind of relatively neutral, had multiple peaks, or had that end peak. So it was really nice for us to see our data used in this way. So look, I've interrupted you as you talked about the method. Why don't you tell us a little about what you saw in the end? Because we've shown people the ads, you've gone back and recontacted them. Did the pattern kind of fit what we might think we'd see with the Pecan Rule?
Yeah, it fit nearly perfectly. Thank God. We saw that the people were significantly better at recalling not only the brand, but also specific creative details for videos where the peak occurred at the end, compared to the low emotion groups. Even the videos which had multiple peaks throughout, those were also significantly better recalled and recognized using the creative recognition question than the videos in the low emotion category, the control group. So yeah, we did see a significant correlation between the amount of emotional response and the ability to correctly recall and remember the adverts. And I think that is, you mentioned it being the interesting part of the study being that it's almost incredibly simple in the way it's been carried out, in that you're just showing people videos and then asking them a week later if they remember them. And there's a lot of great studies that we were using to references in the development of this research. Particularly famous one with the Aaron Bass Institute, where in Australia they simply called people up after they were aware of after exposure to ads, and asked them to describe certain elements. And that idea of a recall and a recognition survey is obviously, as you said, not too complicated. But I think having the ability to track the responses using the facial coding technology that Affectiva could provide just gave it a really interesting layer where we could go deeper into the data and go beyond just the standard recognition and recall, the recall response as well. So that's why I really enjoyed putting the study together as well, because just identifying the videos itself was fun. But yeah, the results really did correspond to the Pecan Rule theory, in that showing a video where you generate at least one intense moment of emotional response, that gives your video a significantly better chance of being remembered compared to a video that doesn't produce an emotional response. Which it sounds like, when you say it out loud like that, it sounds painfully obvious. But I think this is something that not enough brands and advertisers are doing. And a point to make on the control group is that the videos in the control group, just because they weren't emotionally stimulating, doesn't mean they're necessarily bad ads from a standard content testing perspective. They were in a lot of instances very well branded. They included lots of rational messaging in a way. They had great voiceovers and soundtracks, but where they fell short was their ability to give the viewer, a reason to remember, which seems to be the emotional response.
Yeah, and it did really strike me. And again, we've both worked in this industry for a long time, so we're used to seeing the kind of recall of advertising that consumers give when you ask them to talk about ads that they remember. And it's still really kind of hit home when you looked at the low levels of recall in that control group. We all know that, I guess, people aren't really paying that much attention to advertising, but within the industry we still start getting sucked into kind of the power of our own proposition as we're building the ads. And as marketers, we often think, wow, of course people will be interested in my product and my great new piece of information. But I guess fundamentally this just reminds us that that's not true. People are at best indifferent. And so it felt to me like this was really endorsing the power of emotion to begin to engage people more, because a brand and a product in its own right won't always do that.
Yeah, no, that's a great point, and it's something that we did see in the data as well, and it's I guess a testament to the survey design that obviously you helped with, Graham. Thank you very much again. Where we saw that people were maybe telling us their brand they were telling us that they could recall the correct brand after seeing the low emotion, the control group. But then when we actually asked them to specifically tell us what they remember about the creative, after cueing them with the brand name, saying, okay, you've told us you remember seeing a video, identifying that video as brand X's video. Okay, what were brand X advertising? And then you could see in the response there that people, they couldn't remember. They were perhaps just defaulting to the brand based on the category cue. So I think that's a really interesting point there, that using the emotional response gives having the emotional element to the advert seems to give viewers a reason to pay attention to those ads, continue watching, and as you said, to actually maybe almost subconsciously remember things based on just being taken away by the narrative. But that idea of the combination of attention and emotion is definitely something that Unruly have been researching over the last year. We've done a number of eye tracking studies with Lumen, and we're looking to further our understanding of the link between attention and emotion as well.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that also struck me about this study, in particular, the way that the recall of the ads was very focused. It wasn't like the more the ads with the emotional peaks had recall throughout. It was that very specific elements of those ads were being recalled, which is entirely, of course, consistent with the peak end theory. But I guess it just kind of, it makes me think a little about the role of emotion. And I know this was something that you and I have talked about before. So it feels like there's certainly there's a sense in which emotion and the neuroscience on this is really clear. That, emotion is a cue in the brain to pay attention. It's it's a means by which your emotional or your kind of cognitive resources are drawn to something which might have, I guess, evolutionary value. But this study really again reinforced that doesn't mean that people will pay attention to everything in an ad if you get them to feel something, right? It's what you'll pay attention to is very selective even within the narrative. So what, the nature of those peaks and those moments become really important, because those are really the only things that will carry forward in memory. And given most people are not going to make a choice about your brand when they see your ad, all the effects have to be mediated by memory somehow. So that's a really important thing, I guess, for advertisers to remember.
Yeah, well, it has huge ramifications for how you structure a video creative, where you put the branding, for instance, all of a sudden becomes intrinsically linked with how you're going to generate that emotional response. Because as you said, if you just add the branding onto an end frame at the end of the video, that could come 4 seconds, 3 seconds after the high point of an emotional response, at which point the viewer is kind of almost closed off any more cognitive onboarding, because they've reached the high point and then they're on the way back down. So one of the things we did see in the test is that brand recall, there did seem to be a link between brand recall and where the branding was taking place in the video. So the videos which performed well at brand recall perspective and the creative recall perspective were the ones where the brand was present or even directly responsible for the moment of peak emotional response. And in some instances, and this is probably one of my favorite intricacies, was there were some instances where certain videos, respondents couldn't identify the brand, couldn't recall the brand when asked brand recall. But then when we asked the respondents, okay, you watched a video for this brand, what can you remember about it? All of a sudden, the creative details come rushing back, even though when it was unaided, they were struggling. But as soon as you cued them with the brand, they were like able to recall the video almost in full detail, which just goes to show that, I guess, if you do have that if you do create an ad that generates that emotional response, it comes with so many positive associations, where if you see that brand out in market, for instance, of course you see the brand in a print ad, for instance, which is obviously not a moving video, but if you see the print ad and you have seen the video prior to seeing the brand name in the print ad, all of a sudden gives you the memory of the video comes flooding back, and it's almost like you just keep extending the reach of the video if branding is well integrated in it enough and aligned with the emotional response.
Yeah, and it's interesting you say that, because I think we're often asked in the work that I guess we do collectively, but also that we at Affectiva do more widely. We're often asked how the technology can be used to generate kind of cut downs and so on. And I think the best cut downs are absolutely the ones that do what you've just talked about. They probably cue off those kind of emotional high points, but in doing so, they then actually kind of bring back the rest of the idea and the rest of the campaign by kind of featuring those real highlights that then have stuck in memory and may then bring back the a wider recall of the campaign.
Of course, yeah.
So while we've been talking, we've had a couple of questions come in, so I thought it's worth us just quickly reading them out. One of the questions was interesting about agency ratings. So we've been asked, if you look recently at ad agencies are based on ratings. How do you think we can improve the ratings that agencies are scored on? Including things like post surveys and better targeting. So
wow, what a question.
Yeah, I know.
Well, the idea of surveys and targeting is something that is, those are intrinsically linked at Unruly. But one of the things that we pride ourselves on is being able to deliver targeting segments based on the content tests that we run for our clients. So that's definitely something that I would recommend, obviously. But I think just, the focus on brand building and those long-term metrics is something that feels like there is maybe not enough agencies taking advantage of the learnings out there at the moment. Think of all the stuff about all the Peterfield, Lesbianet, IPA data bank work, the recent creative effectiveness and creative ladders of ladder of creative effectiveness, research that was just launched at Cannes, that's all of that material out there at the moment is really should be used by agencies to help plan and buy the media.
Yeah, agreed. And I think actually related to that, I know a lot, lots of clients kind of, I guess, compensate their agencies on a number of different ways. Obviously, creative excellence is a huge part of that. I thought it was really interesting the way that the research at Cannes recently has kind of indicated that the relationship between, I guess, effectiveness and creativity has kind of broken somewhat in recent years. And I thought again, this study says something interesting to me about why that might be. I think if people are focusing more on the pure creative idea, but not necessarily the way the brand kind of plays a role in that, then that may be one of the reasons. And again, I think I would certainly look at how agencies and clients can look more closely at kind of the, if you like, the narrative framework, the structure of the stories they're telling as part of that evaluation framework.
Yeah, I guess it's almost bridging the gap between the short and the long term, and just recognizing the long-term benefits do provide the short-term benefits that obviously agencies and brands need to deliver on as well.
Yeah. There's another really interesting question we should just touch on as well, which is someone's asked, that if you like, their experience of ads, and particularly, I guess, their emotional experience is often based more on speech and on tone and on music rather than just visuals. And what are our thoughts on that?
That's that's another excellent question. Interestingly, completely biased and anecdotal, but when I was choosing the videos for the Pecan Rule study, using obviously the category system worked on with Affectiva, I was actually surprised because the videos in the low emotion, the control group, they had, some of them had excellent soundtracks, like really, really good soundtracks. They were, one of them in particular, the Clean Bandit song, which at the time of release it felt like it was everywhere. And I almost feel like the advert was maybe suffered from the fact that it did feel like such an ubiquitous track at the time that it was very hard to place where you knew it from. But in our own content testing at Unruly, you do see that having a powerful and thematically resonant, I would say, soundtrack can help to amplify an emotional response, and we see that in the verbatim response that we get from users. They are very, very quick to tell us if they like or dislike the music used in an ad. But one of the things I guess we have to be quite conscious of is if you rely just on your music or your soundtrack to deliver the emotional response. You're talking about when you start to talk about the different media types available to you, sometimes you'll be appearing somewhere where you're maybe not certain that your ad will be played with sound, for instance. So if you hang your emotional hat purely on the idea of the ability to deliver audio as well as deliver audio, you could be almost selling yourself short. And one thing we have found Unruly is using A/B tests of sound on ads versus sound off ads, is it's still very, very, very achievable to deliver emotional responses using in a completely sound off environment, because as you touched on earlier, Graham, it's narrative, for instance, plays such a huge part. Shot selection, dictating where people should be looking on the screen at any point based on that. It is still very much possible to generate the response required to enhance the memorability.
Yeah, and I think you touched again on narrative, and I think that to me perhaps is one of the key things that explains why some of the ads that were in that control group that weren't as emotional as perhaps we might think, even though they had perhaps a really well known or really powerful soundtrack, I guess comes back to the role that the music may be playing in the narrative. So an interesting, a well-known soundtrack might gain a little bit of engagement and attention, but if it's not contributing to the emotional flow of the story, then I guess that's going to be a lot less powerful in terms of generating strong emotions than if it's really relevant and kind of makes a real point about it helps reinforce the narrative.
Yeah, because music can contribute to the narrative in and of itself, but exactly as you said, if it doesn't tie in that way, it almost feels like it could work with a completely different track, then obviously, yeah, that's going to have an impact too.
Great. Well, look, we've talked for a while. I was going to kind of close, I guess, by asking you a couple of questions just around how Unruly are using these results with clients, and also, I guess, kind of what's next. You know, what else are you planning to explore using these sorts of approaches?
Yeah, so Unruly, as I've mentioned a couple of times now, we have obviously a content testing methodology which we use the Affectiva's facial coding to help with, and this research has really helped us to better understand how people respond to videos, which means that we can pass that learning onto our clients. You know, if we see the emotional response is lower than a norm, for instance, and we can look at the facial coding data and say, well, you know, here's your issue, and here's one way in which you can solve it, and here's the evidence to back that up. Another way is at Unruly, one of the things that we use the content testing for is to inform edits as well, so cut downs. So if we have lots of clients have TV ads that they don't think are gonna work as well on digital environments, because as we mentioned before, you know, the audio situation, and maybe they would rather a cut down version, you know, 15-second instead of a 30-second. We can use we're using the Pecan Rule research to really showcase to clients how, even though your ad is 15 seconds, even though it's only half the length, you can still deliver the the same amount of emotional response if you focus on the high points of your ad. So it's informing our content testing in those ways, and obviously informing our editing products as well in the other ways.
Great.
And yeah, next up is I guess what else can we layer on top? You know, we've spoken about facial coding, we've spoken about content testing using surveys. Yeah, attention is something that we're incredibly interested in, so eye tracking as well.
Great. Okay. Well, look, we've loved being part of the study. I think it's been a really interesting experiment, and yeah. So thanks for involving us in that. And yeah, I think it's really reinforced, I think, some of the things we've also seen around the power of emotion, the importance of emotion, and the importance of understanding, you know, within a narrative, what are those key moments that are really kind of triggering the responses, so that, you know, we can learn from that, but also, you know, make better cut downs and campaigns moving forward. So yeah, it was a real pleasure to be part of it, and thanks for sharing some of that with us today. So yeah, well, so thanks everyone for listening. Certainly I've enjoyed it, and enjoyed the conversation, so I hope you will have as well. And we'll see you next time on our next live stream. Thanks.
Awesome. Thank you, Graham. Thank you, everyone. Bye.